Welcome to Venator Chronicles Podcast. I'm Ethan Taylor.
And I'm Dustin Jelly.
Our hope is to inspire new and old hunters alike.
We hope you can join us on this journey of lessons that we have, are, and will learn through the world of hunting. And we are back.
Again.
Man, it's just been way too long, and
Yep.
just so many stories to crank out.
Yeah.
So many adventures to talk about.
Yeah, and I think
So many deer slain to talk. Oh wait, a deer to talk about.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking too, like we're obviously kind of cramming in some episodes together here.
Yeah.
And people are gonna hear these not
We're
necessarily
totally doing this out of order.
not necessarily out of order, but they're
Yeah.
gonna have like the understanding of like, oh, 2 months early, this is what happened the last 2 months. So we kind of have to recap them both if we do them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
There's a lot to
basically,
recap.
life happens. People get it. 2
Yeah.
months, basically. If I was out for 1 month, Dusty was out for 1 month, and then now here we are.
Yeah. You were physically out for a month, basically. I was emotionally out for a month.
Yep. And now we're here.
Now we're here.
Back together
We're back
again.
together.
So
If
Dustin,
anybody was worried that we broke up,
yeah,
don't worry, folks. We're still together.
Yeah.
We're still a podcast couple.
yeah, things are just as
They're
hot
peachy.
as ever. So Dustin, can you give the people your just give them your perspective on
On the
my
the
9
harvest?
my 9-point
The
buck,
kill?
my kill,
Oh.
my
The harvest?
my
Or was it a
murder.
harvest. Your murder?
Yeah.
You're taking
The satisfying of my bloodlust.
bloodlust. Oh man. So what that happened 2 weeks ago now? I think. Was that 2 weeks ago? Yeah, like a week.
It was the 16th.
The 16th.
11,
yeah.
16.
Yeah, so about 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Okay.
So about 2 weeks ago, yeah, the 16th, because I was actually headed down to Minneapolis that day for a big jiu-jitsu event, facing off against a two-time Olympic alternate wrestler. Wow.
I mean,
It's late.
which makes sense though. I mean, with your level.
Yeah, like I only faced Olympians, I faced a 4-time judo Olympian, faced 2-time Olympic alternate wrestler. So yeah, I was headed down, super focused on that, and especially that week of, that was kind of my big focus. And I got a Facebook message. Ethan was messaging Seth and I that he was going out for a hunt that morning, that he was going to go and sit out in this blind over some bait, and he wanted to get some does. I'm like, oh, cool. And I'm busy. I'm driving along, and all of a sudden I see a message pop up from Ethan, and there's a video, and so once I was able to stop and for some gas, I watched the video, and there's a video of Ethan having a massive breakdown of excitement that he just shot this buck, and he was losing his mind. And there's like, oh, well, that's cool. And my first question, I'm kind of a jerk. I'm totally focused on what I'm doing and other reasons we'll get into. But like, oh, that's cool. Did you find it? It's my first question.
That's a fair question.
And there's a legitimate
fair
question,
after our
especially
2-day
after
hunt.
after the 2-day hunt, not finding deer. I actually legitimately was like, what? Were you able to find it? Like,
Yeah, they'll hear that 2-day
Yeah.
hunt and the episode after.
and
this
you'll
thing,
understand why.
but- Yeah.
And I didn't even mean it, but at the time there was no congratulations, no nothing, and so it's like whatever, because I'm thinking, Ethan said he was going out that morning, he was going to go sit in this blind that was over a bait pile, and that his goal was to get a doe. Which, hey, cool, like I'd sit over a bait pile in a blind to get a doe and put some meat in the freezer, and next thing I know, he's smoking a nice buck, apparently the biggest buck he's ever shot in his life, over a stinking bait pile. I was like, oh, wow. And so I went along my day and did what I did, and then we touched base a little while later about the whole incident, and lo and behold, to as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story actually turned out to be way cooler and way more in depth than just Ethan going out sitting over a friend's bait pile blind and luckily getting a buck. So Ethan, please share with the good old folks of VCP Nation what actually the rest of the story,
the inside,
inside, what actually happened and how this whole situation actually came out to be. Because ultimately, it's actually way cooler than you just going out and sitting over a friend's bait pile and getting lucky. Much to my bias.
and I happen to agree with you that that wouldn't be nearly as cool as how I felt the story actually unfolded. And so when we were talking, and you were like, "Oh, that's what happened," like when we finally heard the actual story,
I didn't even. And folks, you got to keep in mind, like,
you're like, "That's way more wholesome."
I've been super busy. Ethan's been super busy. We honestly haven't really connected because obviously there hasn't been any podcasts for like 2 months.
Right. Yeah. And
so we haven't really talked a whole lot. And when
he didn't know like all of my like prior to
details.
Prior to those 2 months, like we kind of knew each other's setups, like the fine minute details, and we just had not been as much on the same page, so to speak, as we normally were as far as the hunting setups we had going. So yeah, what happened with this one is, first of all, I had out of the blue, a buddy from work who
kind of go into how this whole
I mean it's kind of crazy is I had a buddy from work show up, and he's just an awesome dude, and just shows up and he's like, "Hey, can you come outside real quick?" And I'm like, "Sure." And this is just, I mean, literally out of the blue. And I mean, obviously he knew I like to hunt, and he goes and brings me to the back of his car. He's like, "Here," he's like, you can have this on one condition." And I'm looking, I'm like, "Wait, what is this?" And it's a ground blind. He's like, "You can have this on one condition." He's like, "You don't sell it." And I was like, fair. It's a fair request.
All right.
And I was like, just elated because literally that day and a couple days before as well, I was like, I need to get a ground blind so I can bring my kids out and put it somewhere where my kids can access, and it's an enjoyable experience for them. And it's not just, I only go here in the right wind, and it's like I'm going for a monster buck or nothing. Mm-hmm. And so I really wanted this area that was much more conducive to bringing the kids out and family, and trying to make it something they could enjoy with me, and being able to share that. And so anyway, I was given this blind out of the blue, and that was, I think this spring or something like that. I don't know. And so, anyway, a bunch of time goes by, and I hadn't set it up, and a friend reaches out to me, and he's like, "Hey, do you have a ground blind?" And I was like, yeah, I actually do. He's like, "So I'm and we were both kind of like talking what we were kind of hoping to do." He's like, "Hey, I'm hoping to set up some people here, and I want to make sure, have it pretty easily accessible. I want it so we can go shoot some does if there's does around."
It was a good buddy, Ben.
Yeah. And he was like, wanted to set up, I think, his wife in it as well, and just something that we could kind of use. And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll let you use the blind. You'll let me use the spot, and we'll both kind of, we'll both put bait out there because we're both trying to get deer, trying to create some experiences." I think he had his nephew or something like that he was also going to be bringing out there, that he had bought a trail camera for, that he was setting up. So there's like this whole, it was the community thing we talk about. Mm-hmm. And so it was funny because this line of thought and this vein is totally different from like when we talk about, I'm trying to locate a buck bedding area, trying to get this stuff all nailed down exactly how I want it to be.
Yep.
And this area is more about how do we create, basically trying to instill and create memories for the next set of hunters and continue to build the community we talk about. And so it was this cool, basically collaboration where it was an area that was within a mile of my house that I had not been able to check out yet. I got pins all over it on X, but I never made it out there. And he had made it out there, and he had showed me a buck, 10-pointer that he had on camera. He had, I think, the buck that I shot on camera, or maybe he didn't have that one on yet. Okay. And then another buck that had a side like totally broken off. That was a good buck. And I was like, "Oh man, I'd shoot even the one with the broken side off. Like, that's cool. That's some awesome character." So anyway, and him and I kind of went back for like 2 or 3 weeks it might've been even a month, where it was like, "Hey, can you make it out there to set it up today?" Cause we had a pin of where we were thinking it should go. And I think he was already baiting.
Okay.
And had the camera out there, and it just, neither of us were able to make it out there. And then one day on lunch, I ran the blind over to the parking lot he was going to run in at. And we talked a little bit more there, saw some pictures, and he set it up and kind of put brush around it. And so, anyway, I was getting to the point where I was going to be able to actually go out. I think it was like the week after he set it up, something like that. And I was planning on going out just by myself. I'd asked my kids like throughout the week. I was like, "Hey, do you want to go?" I wasn't going to force them to go. I was like, hey, do you want to go? Do you want to go? Trying to make sure that they knew it was going to be a good time. We're going to be able to, not be super intense with dad. Neither of them wanted to go. The two older ones, neither of them wanted to go. And so it was Friday, the day I was going to go, the 15th. And, when I know I have hunting time, and especially after work, it's like everything in my mind is like boom, 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 boom. I've already planned out need to get this, need to make sure I have this. Everything is very trying to be efficient when I go home.
Regimented.
Yeah. And get there as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I get home and I'm stripping off my work clothes, trying to get on the hunting clothes, trying to get all this stuff together. And my 5-year-old's like, I want to go now. And I was like,
because they always plan the best times.
They're great planners
to want to go.
Well, and it was there's that little bit of moment where the ultimate goal of what I want it to be is him wanting to go hunting, and then him not feeling like that's an obstruction to what dad's doing.
Yeah.
And so there was a moment, and my wife even saw it. It was like a moment of me trying, I think I even
you battling the
I
selfish
turned,
you.
I kind of made sure he wasn't able to see my face, because I was like, okay, I need to adjust my expectations here.
Yeah.
Because I was going in thinking, hey, there's bucks, there's does, whatever. And so I was trying to just quickly adjust my expectation. It took me a couple minutes, and I was like, all right, buddy, let's get our stuff together. We, still kind of hurried everything. And we got out the door. We went out to the blind. We walked out there, and this is the night. This is the 15th, and the 16th is the day I shot the buck. And we got out there, and we were in the blind, and we put some bait out there, and he's sitting next to me. We're sitting there, and we're laughing and joking a little bit, and he's eating one of the deer bait apples, and we're just whatever, having a good time. And then he, I can see he's getting pretty tired. It's like as soon as there's 5 minutes of silence, our kids are just out. And I was like, do you want to lay on the ground for a bit, buddy? He's like, yeah. And so, set up my backpack as a pillow. He goes down, sleeps, and didn't see anything, heard some movement around us, but didn't see anything. And so when it got dark, kind of decided we wrapped it up and headed out. I carried him out. It wasn't too far of a walk. But it was what I wanted. I was able to adjust my expectations well enough that I was like, okay, this was cool. I'm really glad he came out. He wasn't super disappointed that he fell asleep. He wasn't super disappointed that he wasn't freezing cold. He wasn't miserable. It was kind of everything I was hoping it would be for him except for deer. So anyway, I get home and my wife, she definitely felt for me in a sense. And she's like, it's probably not too big of a deal if you want to go out tomorrow morning as well. And I'm like, oh, no way. And I'm like, okay. So I start checking the wind right away. And I'm like, okay, it's an east wind. And Ben and I were talking. We're like, yeah, the only wind we wouldn't hunt this on is an east wind. And I'm like, but when you can hunt, you can hunt. And really my main priority is putting meat in the freezer. And we have a baby due in basically a month and a half from this time. And I know, hunting's going to be scarce then, and it's already getting towards the end of the season. And so I did want to actually put some action into saying that's my priority. And there's definitely other places I would have went had I was just thinking buck, and that's it. But anyway, so the forecast was supposed to be northeast or an east, shifting to a northeast, which would have put it at a marginal wind, but definitely one that I could have hunted on based on the trails. Yeah. And
you only had a couple hours too that morning?
Well, I started walking to the stand a little later than I wanted to. It was about 5:30 when I started walking out there, but it's seriously, it's not a long walk. It was like 150 yard walk maybe.
Oh, nice.
And so I get into the blind and I kind of get settled in, and I'm sitting there, and the wind is still east. And I think it was so I was in there about 5:45 or 6 o'clock. And then I think 6:30, 7 rolls around, and the wind is not shifting as forecasted, which is probably shocking, I'm sure, that the weatherman was wrong. Anyway, but I'm like, I'm just gonna I'm gonna hunt. I'm just gonna stay and hunt. And I had a deer to the the southeast of me blow. And with another 20, 30 minutes, I had a deer to the east of me blow at me. Both within 50 yards, super thick stuff. not, and I'd actually seen a deer walking with my binoculars that blew at me, I believe, out towards the south, which would have been to my left, and just got a glimpse of it a little bit. And that's what I had seen. And it was like, okay, well, I know a lot of people would probably call it good at that point. It's 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you got blown at by 2 deer. Your wind's not changing. It's not a great look as far as whether you should be out there or not. And really, they wouldn't be wrong. And so, I mean, truthfully, it's like, this is where I can hunt. I'm hoping for the best here, hoping the wind's going to shift, hoping the deer are going to come in. And so while I was sitting there and I waited there about another hour 15 or so, and my wife texted me, and this is the funny part. And I left this out of the YouTube video because I felt like there needed to be more context in it. And she texted me, she's like, yeah, you're gonna have to be done hunting pretty soon. And I took that as like, oh, we got to wrap it up soon. We're going to head home. And I was like, and I was already at the point of like, no problem. Like, I'm not going to, this today's totally,
it is what it is.
Yeah. Dang. Today's totally extra anyway. And it's not, I'm not crazy high odds right now where it's like, babe, I gotta be in this blind. So I wasn't going to burn any bridges over, another hour or something. And so come to find out later, what she meant was like, just in general with the year and the baby coming and just kind of like a general statement. And I was like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I totally agree. But what's so cool about and funny about that is like that text was like, okay, time to do last ditch effort. And so what I did was I was like, well, if those bucks are around, because I saw them on trail camera within the week, one of them, the 9-pointer, I ended up shooting. I was like, well, if they are around, I'm just going to do, a calling sequence. Yeah. And so what I did was I had my grunt call, and it's got a snort wheeze thing on there that I can use as well. And so, and started raking the brushes of the brush right outside the blind, and grunting and trying to just rake and then just doing snort wheezes. Yeah. And I was probably doing it for like 30 to 45 seconds of like intense calling. And so I stopped doing that. I give it about 5 minutes. Don't hear anything. Another 4 or 5 minutes goes by. Same thing. And I'm like, all right, well, little chilly, not super cold, but I'm like, okay, starting to think about that text message. I'm like, all right, I should probably start wrapping it up. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to hang out here a little bit. I'm going to pour myself a cup of coffee. And this is why we call it the coffee buck. We'll post a video about the more details on my reaction. And so I pour myself a cup of coffee, and the wind is blowing from the back of my head straight towards this bait pile where I'm hoping some does are coming out. Yeah. Mind you, I do realize that where there's does, there are probably bucks this time of year, or there's a good chance of it. Good chance, yeah. So it doesn't escape me, but mainly the priority was getting meat in the freezer. And so, I'm drinking my cup of coffee. I'm getting some real great action shots of that steam rolling out of the cup. And I get about 3/4 way through the cup of coffee, and I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should do that closing, exit interview, because I share all my failures on Instagram if anyone's interested.
We call them lessons.
Yeah, lessons. So I had 10 lessons up to this moment, to my 11th hunt. And the steam's, rolling out of the coffee cup, and I'm like, all right, well, I should do this exit interview. And I do the exit interview, and the timestamp for starting that was 8:28. And I believe it was 8:31, 8:32 when I came back, literally losing my mind.
You were losing your mind, all right.
What happened in that 3 to 4 minutes felt like such a long time. And was probably the most intense. It was for sure the most intense moments of the year. So what happened was I finished the cup of coffee. I ended the interview. I'm looking around to figure out what I need to start putting away quietly. And I glance to my left, and I don't even recall if I heard anything, because the deer was already within 7 or 8 yards of me at this time. This buck was coming in, like if you've seen a pissed off buck with its head kind of angled and pointed down, like trying to figure out who he can come beat. Park. Yeah, like coming to see who he can figure out who he can beat up. Like it I still haven't figured out a good way to describe that moment, like the deer being that close, like that sudden, and looking at like this big bodied deer with a bigger rack than I've encountered.
Kind of like the T-Rex scene from Jurassic Park
Just,
when it like lowers its head in and it's all.
It felt, yeah, and it felt fake. It felt so fake. I was like, this isn't this. Like I just could not believe this was happening. So anyway, the deer's coming in from the my left side. The wind is blowing from his butt straight from, like, the wind is at both of our backs.
Yeah.
Now his trail eventually crosses probably about 15 to 20 yards. It'll cross in front of my ground blind.
Yeah.
And then I'm busted.
Yeah.
At least I would say I'm busted. And so he's coming from that side, and I can see him out the side window. There's no shot opportunity there. It's just kind of a viewing spot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he stops, and he kind of does a little bit of a bob, looking in that tent window, trying to figure out what's going on, if there's anything to worry about. And I'm frozen still. Then he takes another step, and there's a gap where I can grab my bow, just a very small gap, grab my bow, hook up my release. And then he's in two small vertical slits that have brush in front of it. So you're not going to shoot out of those either.
Yeah.
And so so I have my bow, and he starts coming across the front of this thing. And he stops where I can see basically from the front of his front shoulder up.
Okay.
And his head's out now. And he's not looking mad anymore.
Yep.
His head's up. He's facing my direction, like right at the tent. Starts licking his nose, and really, like, you can see him like just really trying to get what's going on.
Yeah.
And my bow is, at chest level, like I have it, where I'm just going to push the bow out and pull my arm back.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, at this point it's pivotal. I'm going, okay, I'm either busted or I'm going to get a shot at this deer. And so I just draw as slowly as I can, and literally like 3/4 back, I'm like, I don't know if I can actually pull this all the way back. Cause like I was trying to do it super slow.
Yeah.
And so I get it. I do get it all the way back. I anchor. Now for this shot, I can, in good conscience, say I actually went through a shot process,
nice.
Which is a huge win. And so what happened was I get it all the way anchored. I get my anchor points, and I didn't start with the pins on the deer. Not that I had much of an option anyway, because it was all neck, right?
Yeah.
And so all I needed to do was just lean to my right, probably 7 or 8 inches, and that was going to open up basically his vitals to me.
Yeah.
And so I lean to my right, and he's at, I think it was 10 or 12 yards, right in that range.
Okay.
And I lean out to my right, expose all of his vitals.
Yeah.
I actually pick a spot. I just put my green pin on it because it's my 20-yard pin. I'm like, this is going to work just fine. Pick a spot and actually start pulling through the shot and thinking about pulling through the shot. And I shoot. I don't see my lighted knock, so where it hits. I just see the buck instantly just bolt. And in that second to half a second, I could see the buck. I watched there was a John Dudley video. It doesn't really matter that it was his, but basically he shot a deer, and you can see kind of the layers of skin and meat from the very initial shot where there's no blood coming out, but you can kind of see this change in color as they kind of rotate around each other. And I thought I had seen that, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I didn't see my lighted knock go in. And so I immediately start losing my mind, because as soon as the shot happened, I feel super good about it. Sounded super good. The buck is so he's running. Sorry, so I should back up. So he's running. I watch him run as far as I can, and I hear the super loud crash. In hindsight, right, 2020. But I hear this loud crash, and then I don't hear any noise for a little bit. But I'm thinking, oh, maybe he's far enough that I can't hear any other bounds or something like that. And I was like, maybe he just ran through some deadfall and just kept going, and it was a little bit clearer there.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so he's somewhere out there, and I record myself, because I love to capture the moment for myself and others, and I love sharing it. And I sent you that video of me losing my mind.
Yep, got that video.
Like, can't breathe. I was I was shaking so bad. It wasn't even cold out. I was like shaking so bad. And called Seth, and I was like, all right, well, should I just back out? What do you kind of gave him the scenario, and we talked it through. And the main thing was like, I need to be able to calm down, get a level head before I choose to make any decisions right now as far as tracking the deer or going after the deer. And so I was like, okay, I waited for 30 minutes, kind of did like an exit interview, like right after I got off the phone. So it was within probably 15, 20 minutes of the shot.
Yeah.
And so I get out, I record where I last saw him going, where I saw him standing, just as fresh as I could remember it, kind of getting all that stuff documented. And then I kind of briefly looked for the arrow in that small area that was open. Didn't see it. And I was like, oh boy. Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't see it sticking out of him, but
that's so disheartening.
You don't know, right?
Yeah.
So here's the fun part. I had prior commitments. I was going to back out either way, but I had prior commitments to go to a swim meet to watch my sister-in-law swim with my wife and kids. And so I was at the swim meet for, I think I left the deer there for 3.5 hours. And in that 3.5 hours, my mind spiraled.
Oh, man.
And every shot that I've missed, the shot that you guys will hear about where, I wounded a deer is what happened, which we'll go into greater detail probably in the next episode after this, from that 2-day hunt. All of those things started playing in my mind again. And I was like, I didn't see where they actually hit. Yeah. I didn't see blood right away. And it was just like, it was not a pretty mental sight at that moment. And my wife was like, okay, well, you're going to head back soon. And literally it was the weirdest thing. I was like, I almost don't want to go back because I want to preserve this feeling, at least the good part of me that I have right now, where I shot for me, a monster buck, the biggest buck I've shot to date. And I didn't want it to get disappointed by not finding the deer. So it was a real weird thing because obviously I was really excited to go back and look for it as well. So anyway, my brother Ben and I, we went back, had some trouble following the blood trail. I still had a good general sense of direction, even though I kind of knew probably 60 yards past where we were trailing, where we lost blood. So I was like, okay, you keep working on this trail. And he's, on his hands and knees looking around. And I'm going to go, there's this clearing that kind of surrounded the area that he would have had to bound through based on his travel route. And it was all like nice brown sage grass, whatever. It was like about knee high or so, where you could just pick up blood really easily compared to what we were looking at.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go just very slowly walk the perimeter, see if I find any blood. So I go to walk the perimeter and I don't get probably 3 steps along that perimeter and I see blood on this nice brown, whatever. Yeah. Grass. And I'm like, I look at it closely and I'm like, Ben, fresh blood. And I look at it closely and there's bubbles in it. And so it's the first like bubbles that we had seen. This is still within 60 yards of the stand. And so I'm excited. Ben's coming over and I'm looking and then I kind of look up and I scan and it was like white belly. I'm got goosebumps now because it was like such an amazing feeling actually seeing it and being like, this might be real. And because of the stupid, they'll hear about it in the next episode, because we saw that dead deer that coyotes had killed. The first thing my mind went to was like, oh, is that not my deer? Like I was wrestling with that for the 5 minutes before I walked over there. So anyway, we found the deer and it was basically like the shot was money. double lunged. It wasn't as quartering away as hard as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And so it was more of a broadside shot and I was really, really pleased with it. And I was like, this is beautiful. And so anyway, we got the buck and we field dressed it. We took it out. Something had gotten to it in those few hours, which is surprising to me.
Yeah.
And it started right at its guts, which is real. Because any canines that I've seen get after any animals, always, it seems like it's instinctual. They start on the hindquarters. Yeah. Everyone's I've seen, it's hindquarters. So someone was like a fisher or a pine marten or there's a bear that was in the area. Okay. I don't know where they start. So anyway, it was odd. Yeah. But I got the buck and then I came back the next day actually, and the next night and looked for my lighted knock because I could not find the arrow when we were out there. Yeah. And that arrow had passed through the deer at about 10 to 12 yards and gone another 40 yards before it hit the dirt. It was like, okay.
Nice.
Yep. Believer in the fixed broadheads. And so, Yeah, we call it the coffee buck. That's what we're gonna dub this one.
That's a fitting name.
I'm not much of a buck namer before you shoot them yet, and it's probably because I don't have enough target bucks to actually need a name yet. Is my assumption. But
this one's fitting.
We're gonna name this one postmortem. Coffee buck.
Yes.
So
very fitting.
That's kind of how that one all unraveled. Do you feel like I'm missing anything? Is there any parts that you
no?
feel like maybe I didn't get any
think,
details?
I think that really hits it. Like I said, my initial perception of the whole situation was like, oh, you went on a friend's bait pile and got lucky, and really the reality of the story is like, no, there's actually like that whole collaborative effort between you and Ben, and the reason why that spot was even curated. It just goes a lot deeper than just going out, and honestly, I mean, being from Minnesota and hearing about bait piles, you're just like,
you're right. Yeah.
Those stupid Wisconsinites and their bait piles.
Yeah.
Bunch of cheaters.
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is, like you went out, I mean, obviously thinking that, hey, there's a possibility that there could be a nice buck, but I'm going out, I'm trying to get a doe. I just want some meat in the freezer, and then doing what you did, doing the call sequence. And I mean,
he didn't even circle downwind.
Had you not even done that, or had you decided to get out of the tent 1 minute earlier,
right,
or the blind 1 minute earlier, like that whole situation would have been gone.
Yeah.
And it was just, it's kind of a cool story, just like, hey, we found the spot, we created this spot for a reason, and this is what turned out. So
well, and I think it's one of those.
It's much more than just you went out, got lucky over a bait pile.
Yeah, and I mean, to be 100% honest, it's definitely not. It's not the type of hunting that if I'm after a big buck, it's not my primary way.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to have in your tool bag.
Yeah,
we talked about this some time ago with Seth, where it's like, if you have a good buck coming on bait in daylight, why wouldn't you use that? You know what I'm saying? And if it's legal,
well, yeah.
So it's like there's.
I got a buck coming in on bait. It's probably not legal being in Minnesota.
Oh my gosh. But like the idea of it being like, it's not my primary way that I hunt. It's not like the preference way, but it's one of those things that is part of the beauty of hunting is you don't know what can happen.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times I think, and I know I'm guilty of it too, where it's like, oh, I got this figured out. Oh, it's the best time. There's no reason this shouldn't be here. It's like, well, they're unpredictable animals.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to have that essence of luck. Is just
there's always an element of that, I think, in every successful hunt.
But I do like what Vince Lombardi said: luck favors the prepared.
Yeah,
and that was part of it. You were prepared, and and it favored you that day.
Yeah, and I think it was really cool being able to make it a thing that, like, I know I guess I wrestled with the whole bait pile side of it, and being like, oh, that's not how I want to do it all. I was hoping to get, figure out my own animal, be where I think they're going to be on the weather, they're bedding, they're this, all these things that I wanted to have control over. And it was like, as I think about the circumstance and the situation and just being like, I even asked Seth, I was like, is there ever a deer you've killed where you've gone and not thought, oh, I'm lucky, or I just got lucky?
Yeah.
And he's like, still hasn't been a time. I mean, he's killed some substantial animals. Yeah. And he's like, there hasn't been a time yet where I haven't been like, wow, I got lucky. Yeah. And so kind of accepting like that is a part of it. And then also kind of thinking through the circumstance and understanding, like, if you're not out there, even if it's less than ideal, and if you're not going, hey, hey, here's my Hail Mary, and he came in completely with the wind at his butt, which usually, at least in my experience and from what I understand, they're going to want to wind check something like that. And he was pretty PO'd physically from what I could tell. And so kind of feeling like, oh, I actually did something. Just
being a typical emotional male. Somebody challenged him and he wanted to fight.
All horned up. You know what I mean? So it was just a huge blessing and super excited about it. And really excited to be able to share it. Yeah,
I'm glad for you though. I am glad. Even if I didn't share that in that excitement the day of.
Yeah, I know you're.
We've hashed that one out.
Yeah, well, I think people, like, over the next probably 3, 4, 5, even maybe episodes, they'll kind of start to get an understanding of the deeper things kind of happening. We didn't want to jump straight to that right away. We wanted to catch up with the season a little bit.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it's all understandable and definitely things we've all experienced at some point or another to some extent. So yeah, I guess I do want to mention, we should mention this just so people aren't high and dry here.
All right.
I am going to be having a child in the next few weeks here. And so Dustin and I are going to do our best to try to get at least one episode done a month.
Probably at least better than what we have
had
done the last 2 months.
Yeah.
Nothing.
So,
Absolutely nothing.
Zilch. Hey, we kept it going on the gram.
We did. Yeah, we kept it going on the gram.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
IG.
so yeah, we'll do our best to keep that going. And then if you guys if you want to see the more up-to-date snippet type stuff, give you an idea of what we're doing, Instagram and Facebook are probably the best places to see it. And then to get the more in-depth kind of behind the scenes and what all went into it, you can find us on iTunes, Podbean, whatever you're on now.
Oh, it's good social media.
Yeah, and then there's
platforms.
links in all of our bios and stuff. So
yeah.
Well, it's a late night, man.
It is a late night, so I think we'll wrap this up. But
yeah.
Hope you guys have enjoyed these stories. Us just catching up, sharing what's been going on in the season. Hope you guys have been having a great season, having more success than me. And
so far,
as far as harvesting / killing animals, whatever term you choose to use. But appreciate you guys joining with us today. Man, it's been a late night.
Yeah, it's 1 a.m. just for perspective, people.
This is what we're
doing our best.
Yeah, it's a grind. We're just grinding it for the love of the game.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for joining us, and hopefully you'll be hearing from us again soon.
All righty. Peace out.